Hey everyone, and welcome to CSCI 145. My name's Corey Nance, and I'll be your instructor this semester. I wanted to create this video so that I could introduce myself, as well as make you familiar with the course and how it's laid out here in Moodle. So a little bit about me. I have a master's degree in computer science from Georgia Southern University. I'm currently working on a doctorate in cybersecurity at Dakota State University, and I've been lecturing here in the Department of Computing Sciences at Coastal for about 4 years now. Before that, I spent some time as a systems administrator, a database analyst, as well as a software developer. So for the course, I want to start off by going over the course syllabus. In the course syllabus, you'll find a lot of, basic questions that you may have at the beginning of the semester. Right here on the first page, we have our course title and section, the academic term, the prerequisites. So everyone in here should have either completed 140 or 135 with a grade of C or better. You have my contact information, so my email address, phone number, and one other way to get in contact with me would be through Slack. So Slack is a chat room type application similar to AOL chat rooms or IRC if you're familiar with that. If you click this link, you can get signed up, and when you get in there, there are different channels, which are basically chat rooms, and we have a channel set up specifically for our class. So it's a great place to go in and get help and converse with your fellow students, especially in an online class, since I feel like that's probably the biggest aspect of the class that we miss out on is the actual interaction with other students. So I've seen this work really well in the past where it bridges that gap. My office location is in the AOC 2 building, room 237, and my office hours this semester are Tuesday and Thursday, 9:30 to noon, and Wednesday, 10 to 1. Outside of that, if those hours aren't convenient for you, let me know and we can set up an appointment. As far as textbooks, there is a required textbook, and that's going to be our Xi book, Programming in Python 3. If you had me for 135 earlier this semester, so in the spring one, then you've already got the book. If you didn't, then you can sign up at xibooks.com or purchase an access code from the library. Our Xi book code is this Coastal CSCI 135 Nance Spring 2018. So I realize this says 135, but we actually use the same book, and we're just continuing on with a few more of the chapters in that book here in the 145 class. Alright, there are technology requirements for the course, so you do need a computer that's capable of running Python 3. That's going to be anything that's Windows or Mac or Linux based. I'd say no Chromebooks or tablets. Usually they can't do it, or it would probably be kind of a pain to get it working on a tablet. Maybe not so a Chromebook, but that's up to you. So Python 3 needs to be installed, and you need a high-speed internet connection so that you can watch the lecture videos. Our final exam will be due on May 3rd by 11:59 p.m. of the Moodle server time. So what is this course all about? It's a continuation of the study of programming that we started in 135, specifically in a dynamically typed language. So if you're coming from 140, what you studied was a statically typed language, and what that means is you had to declare data types for the variables that you were creating. Python's a little bit more forgiving in that we don't have to declare data types. We can just assign something to the variable, and Python will derive that data type based on what was assigned to it. So some of the topics will include object-oriented development, user-defined data types, debugging, testing, and elementary distributed computing. You'll get a better look at exactly what we'll be covering over here. We're going to go into a little bit more detail with lists and dictionaries. We're going to talk about functions and creating functions for a couple weeks. We'll look at modules so that we can create modular programs. We'll talk about file I/O, and then we'll wrap up with exceptions. All right, so I won't go through and read all of this to you. I hope that you come back and do read through the syllabus in its entirety. I just want to point out a few critical sections here, like grading. So your final grade for the course will be computed out of 4 categories. So the first category is programming assignments. We'll have 3 programming assignments throughout the semester, and those 3 will be averaged together for 35% of your grade. Each chapter has either a lab or a quiz associated with it, and that'll count for 25% of your grade. The final exam will count for 30% of your grade, and then each week we'll also have homework that counts for 10% of your grade. I do use the university standard 10-point grading scale, so 90 to 100, 80 to 89, 70 to 79, and so on. If you are in the upper bounds of those ranges, I do award B pluses, C pluses, and D pluses. Our instructional activities, they're going to primarily be the readings in the Zybook, which are also interactive, so you'll have different simulations or questions that you'll need to answer as you're reading. And then we also have lecture videos each week that you'll be watching. Due dates, so this is very important. I do not accept any late work. So unless stated otherwise, the assignments are due by 11:59 p.m. of the due date. I am very predictable with due dates. Every Friday we're going to have something due. And I'll show you the Moodle calendar here in a minute, and you'll be able to sort of visually see when all of our assignments are due. Attendance, so for a distance learning course, an absence is defined as a missed online submission, so like a quiz, assignment, or discussion post. It's very important that you do submit something here in the first week. If you don't submit anything, then I have to report you to the registrar as non-attending, and they subsequently drop you from the course. I also want to mention that all the work in this class is expected to be completed individually unless it's stated otherwise in the directions. So any offense of plagiarism or cheating will result in a grade of FX. So please do not plagiarize or cheat. It's usually pretty obvious if you got your source code from somewhere else and you didn't write it yourself for a number of reasons. So just don't be tempted to do that. Start your assignments early, and if you have problems, either come in and get help from me or visit our tutoring lab. We have a number of tutors in the tutoring lab that can help you with some of this course content. If you have a disability, please get that documented with our Office of Disability Services or Office of Accessibility and Disability Services. They'll give you a form that you can get to me that will allow me to start making accommodations for you. Then lastly, I have just some generic links here to some of the services on campus. Some noteworthy ones might be this distance learning support services if you've never taken an online class, or tech support from Student Computing Services, their help desk. You may want to check out some of these. All right, so provide a tentative schedule, which is how I envision the semester working out. We're right here in the week of 3/12. Each week our assignments are going to be due on the Friday of that week. So we're going to start off here in what I'm calling Module 0, which is our review. And our major assignments are what's going to be due that Friday. So this week we're setting up Python, we're doing class introductions, and we also have a practice lab that'll sort of get us ramped up with either refreshing you on what we did in 135 or getting you familiar with the syntax of the language if you're coming from 140. The next week is more of a typical week. We're going to cover lists and dictionaries, which is a chapter out of our Zybook, and we'll have homework and labs due. And then some of the weeks you'll notice that in addition to the homework and labs, we also have a program due. So like I said, there's going to be 3 programs throughout the semester. Each week we'll cover a chapter, and each chapter will have homework and labs associated with it. Some important dates, so 3/16 is the last day to drop without any academic record. 4.9 is the last day to drop with a grade of W. So a W does not count against your GPA on your transcript. It just shows that you had signed up for the class and it's subsequently withdrawn. If you try to drop after 4.9, then what you would get is a WF, which is calculated the same as an F in your GPA. So if you make it that far and don't drop and think you need to, it may be advantageous to just stay in the course and see how you do and just try your best. Lastly, May 3rd is when our final exam will be due. So I have a couple other links here of Python cheat sheets. So these are really good, just refreshers that you can print out and keep with you, or just reference here online. Various ways to do things here in Python, like create a list, create tuples, and so on. User input, and dictionaries. So there's a number of these in here, and some of them get more detailed, like the ones on lists or the ones on dictionaries. So I highly encourage you to bookmark this and check these out as you're writing your programs. I also have a link to the playlist of videos from 135, so if you want to go back and review any of that content, all of that's there. Provide a news forum. This is where I do weekly posts, just sort of announcing what we're doing that week and what assignments are going to be due, and letting you know if you have any questions, just reach out to me. And then also, I had mentioned Slack, but if you don't want to use Slack, you may want to take advantage of the Q&A forum. So what you can do in here is you can jump in and post a question, and this gives me or anyone else who knows the answer the ability to respond. I like this because typically if someone has a question, someone else does, and they just might not be asking. So if we get a nice repository of questions in here with answers, it can really benefit the whole class. All right, last thing out of these links I want to talk about is the grading information. So with the Zybook, and we'll look at the Zybook here in a second, there's participation activities, and there's challenge activities, and then there's labs. So the participation and challenge activities you'll be completing as you go through and you're reading the chapter. That is where your homework grade comes from. So like it says here, complete all of the participation and challenge activities in the assigned chapters. Both categories will be averaged together to determine the assignment grade. So I go a little bit further, and if your average is an 80 or higher, then I give you a 100 in the grade book. This gives you some flexibility to feel free to make mistakes and try things as you're going through. And what I found and what the Zybook recommends is that if you score less than an 80, you're probably not doing the reading, and you might very well be brute forcing the answer, just trying every possible thing that you could think of. So in that case, if you make less than an 80, I assign whatever the average was. Each week you also have a lab grade, so that lab grade will be the average of all of the assigned labs for that particular chapter. So some chapters we only have one lab, some chapters we might have 2 or 3, so those would be averaged together and recorded into the gradebook. And then lastly, the programs, you see the score that you get on all of the programs and labs immediately after you submit them. One nice thing that I like about the Zybook is you can actually keep submitting as many times as you want up until the due date. So every time you submit, it gives you some feedback and tells you what was wrong. And I actually have another video that sort of walks through how to submit a lab and how to interpret the results. So make sure that you watch that one here in the first week. Yep, and I even note that down here at the bottom that there's no penalty for submitting multiple times. The best score that you get out of all of your submissions up till the due date is the one that's used and recorded in the gradebook. Alright, so let's go back to our page here. So our first week, we're going to be going through a review. I've got some videos here on how you can install Python, getting familiar with Python and the particular IDE that we'll be using, which is idle. I have a lecture video that goes through some of the concepts that we talked about in 135. And then I also have this practice lab video that walks you through how to submit labs um, in the zybook. I usually also provide, well actually let me back up. Each week is going to have module learning outcomes, which is what you're expected to get out of this particular module. I have a watch section, which are all lecture videos. I have a read section, which is either supplemental links or the lecture slides from the videos. And then I have a complete section. And the complete section is what it is that you're supposed to complete and turn in for that week. So this particular week, week 1, we're going to do the Python practice lab, and we're also going to do class introductions. Looking at a more typical week, let's look at next week. Again, we have the MLOs at the top, a watch, a read, and a complete. These links right here take you directly to the zybook in the chapter that we are going to be working on. So here in Module 1, we're doing lists and dictionaries. If I click on the homework link, all it really does is take us to the correct section. So you can always just jump in yourself if you'd rather. Looking at these bars up top, we can see all of our chapters and sections. So here we're working in chapter 7, and we're going all the way to the end of this chapter. So this is a good time to talk about the participation activities. So as you're going through and reading the chapter, you'll come across some participation activities. This one is having us look at an illustration as it goes through how lists are being stored in memory. Once you get done with the participation activity, this right here will be filled in with a badge. So I guess I didn't watch the whole thing. But this, there we go. The whole thing will turn orange with a check mark. So there's different types of participation activities. Like this one wants for us to try different inputs here. And if we give it 3, we can see the oldest person lived 117 years. So we're kind of getting to participate and see how the language is working. Let me see if there's an example of a challenge activity. Yes. So challenge activities are like really short program snippets. So this one wants for us to modify short names by deleting the first element and changing the last element to Joe. So what we would do is we would just delete the first element. So as we're reading through, it talks about how to do that. We can delete that first element, and then we can assign the last element to Joe, and then run it just to see if it worked. So as it goes through, it tests it with various inputs, and then we can see our output, and if needed we can go back and make changes. But we can see here that we got this all correct. One test passed, all tests passed. And if you get those blue badges, or ultimately this one up top, you know that you completed that challenge activity. So at the bottom, we can move on to the next section, or you can navigate through the chapter this way. But basically the homework is completing all of these sections and doing all of those participations and challenges. So at the end, there is a lab. And a lab is a short program that you write dealing with the material that we learned about. So I'd encourage you to watch the lab video as it walks through how to submit and how to interpret the results there. Last thing here, and this is program 1. We saw that wasn't due until week 2. Okay, so we'll actually be working on functions when we're supposed to also be working on program 1. And we can see that here when we go into functions, that we'll have complete down here at the bottom, program 1, and that link actually takes us directly to Program 1 in Chapter 7. So the idea is that Program 1 is based upon the content that we learned in Chapter 7. It's just not due until a week after that. So you're more than welcome to work on Program 1 during that second week if you want. But if not, feel free to go ahead and start it on week 3, and that should be enough time to finish. Alright, so I think that's everything I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If not, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Thank you.